Welcome to Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, live from the virtual grill room of the St. Francis Yacht Club. We trust you're all safe and sound in your own environments, and we will welcome you back to the grill room as soon as the St. Francis Yacht Club opens. In the meantime, we're taking advantage of this Zoom meeting capability to have guest speakers from all over the world. And our guest speakers today are none other than the current Rolex Yachtsman of the Year, Mike Martin and Adam Lowry. We couldn't be more pleased by their presence with the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, and they've got a great, exciting presentation for us today. So Mike and Adam, welcome to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.
Thanks so much, Ron. It's an honor to be invited, and we're excited about sharing our story with you today.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Ron. Wednesday Yachtsman Luncheon, that's on the bucket list for me, so I get to check that one off now.
Yeah, we've got a little a presentation here, and what we're going to talk about is our team approach that we've had in our training and sort of the success that it's not only brought to us, but the entire U.S. fleet. First, a little bit of background about ourselves.
Yeah, so I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, not a place that's known for its sailors, more known for its cars, but it does punch above its weight from a sailing perspective. It's very much a 3-month sport in Detroit, and I grew up initially with my dad racing, club racing. He had a Cal 25 and a Thistle, and I got to race those and some other kind of old slow boats like the one in this picture. And when I was about 12 is when I started racing. I joined the program at Bayview Yacht Club and started racing all sort of regionally, and then that led to some international events and national events. And I was lucky enough to have some success there, including a Sears Cup championship, which was the 3-person junior championship, still is. And that led me to Stanford. Stanford, I came out west and was on the team for 4 years. Was lucky enough to be an All-American there. Actually met my wife, who you can see here in the upper left, sailing an FJ with me. I call that photo "Big Guy in a Little Boat." And from there, you know, after college, I jumped into the 49er, and you can see some 49er shots here. The 49er was the new exciting thing in the late 90s. The Sydney Quad was its first introduction into the Olympics. And of course, none of us knew how to sail skiff. So we were tipping over and breaking masts and doing that whole thing. But we were going fast and having a blast. So I did that leading up to the 2000 games. And then actually a little bit afterwards. And then I transitioned to some other fast things. I actually started sailing some 5.0s as a skipper and sailed some moths. And it kind of went from there. My thing is I like to race hard in boats that go fast. And
all right, so yeah, my background is, it's not actually the typical background you hear of. I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia. I learned to sail on the Potomac River at the Washington Sailing Marina, and maybe some people that have sailed in college, that's where Georgetown practices out of, and it's a terrible place to sail. So I don't know how I stuck with it, but somehow I did. And yeah, I didn't have a junior program or anything. I just kind of bummed rides with anyone I could.
What's this racing machine that you're sailing here, Mike?
Yeah, so this actually, this is the first boat I was ever on. So this is my introduction to sailing. And some of you might think this is a snark, but it's not. This is a super snark. So this is the top end of snark sailing.
Mike, I got a technical question. Is this a styrofoam boat?
Yeah, I think it's styrofoam, and I think the super sort of had a plastic shell sprayed on top of it. That's the super category.
Oh, it wasn't because it was over canvassed.
Yeah.
It wasn't because of that.
Yeah. Yeah, anyway, so yeah, from the snark, I moved on, and like I said, you know, it's Washington Sailing Marina. I sailed lasers. With the adults, I sailed Thistles with a guy named Brent Barberhan, and we won the Thistle Nationals a long time ago, 82 and 84, I think. And lasers, and I sailed lasers in college and then sailed lasers sort of in the fleet and was relatively successful there and won the 1985 Laser North Americans. At that point, lasers weren't in the Olympics yet, and I was interested in Olympic programs. So I got a fin, and I sailed fins for the 88 and 92 quad and was on the U.S. sailing team then. Actually, in 92, after that, they banned bottles, and I was a little too small. So I got out of fins and started sailing 505s, and have sailed those really since, you know, the mid 90s till now. And it's a great boat, and I love sailing it. Yeah, some of the other boats I sailed along the way, just trying other stuff out, or with actually another St. Francis member, Zach Berkowitz. I sailed International 14s, and we sailed the Worlds in Yokohama, Japan together. We got second. It's a little disappointing, but it was great sailing with him, and it's a great boat. Also in the skiff realm, you can see the top shot. I sailed a bunch of Australian 18s with Howard Hamlin. So this is a great shot. This is the bridge to bridge race, a great, I call it the greatest race in sailing. But yeah, St. Francis puts that on, and we had a great time sailing 18s, and we won the 18 Worlds twice in the early 2000s. So, but you know, now I'm basically concentrating just on the 505, sailing with Adam, and it's a great boat, versatile in a lot of different conditions. So that actually brings us to the next slide, which is what is a 505? And it's 5.05 meters long, so that's where the name comes from. It's, you know, 127 kilos, which is 280 pounds, crew of 2, main jib, spinnaker. Everything's adjustable. Everything on the boat's carbon fiber except the mast, which is kind of weird, but anyway, yeah, that's the boat.
How many steps across, as a skipper, how many steps across in attack?
One.
One step.
Yeah, if you do it right, you step across with your leading foot and you hook right into the strap, so you can just pop right out on the new side.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do it as right as a crew, it should be 3. 1 in, 1 across, 1 down, 1 on the new rail.
Mm-hmm. And you
I don't always do it right.
all that while you're snapping in and out.
Yeah, well, you got to get the jib too.
That's right, the jib too. Great.
Yeah, so really what we wanted to talk about today is our training philosophy. And you know, this actually started years ago when I was living in Southern California, and we, you know, wanted to do better and wanted to do better in the worlds. And we figured out that, you know, what I learned from the fin program was that, yeah, you needed tuning partners and you needed a training group. And a philosophy that Jay and PZ Glazier really, you know, put upon us is certainly within our group, and we've actually expanded it into sort of all of North America, is your goal is to speed up your tuning partner. And if you want to do well in the worlds, you want to speed up all the Americans. And the reason you want to do that is really you're only going to improve enough to beat the person that's nipping at your heels, or to beat the person that's just ahead of you. And so if you're constantly making your teammate better, then you're just going to have to get better, and you're going to learn, and you're going to improve as well. In the ideal situation, you know, you help out your tuning partner, your teammate, and they actually speed up and are going faster than you. And now they share information on what they're doing, and you apply that and you get faster than them. And it's this sort of leapfrogging, sharing all the information philosophy that we adopted and we have stuck with through today.
Yeah, and with the approach, one of the things that's really important is really to kind of commit to the team. And what it's really about is getting everybody to understand the shared goals that you have as a collective and how that's going to improve individual performance, just as Mike just mentioned. And so what the commitment really looks like is a couple of things. I mean, the first is you got to be there and you got to show up. And Pretty much every day of the year when it's light enough past 5 o'clock that we can do it, you're going to see some 505s going out at St. Francis Yacht Club and going out and training. And usually Mike and I are there. And it's about making sure that you've made the commitment to put in the time to be there every time that you possibly can be. As it says here, not only for your own benefit, but for the benefit of the team. And then the second part is to make sure that when you're there, that you can really focus. I mean, we all have lives, and there's a lot going on, especially now. And it's important as a part of this program that you're able to come and say, okay, I'm going to give it 100%. And I'm going to do so both mentally and physically, so that not only am I able to absorb what I can in trying to improve my game, but I'm there for my teammate to lift everybody's performance so that we as a collective can achieve the results we want.
This approach is all aspects of our training program. So, boat setup, 505s have lots of adjustments and lots of settings. And this is a really good example. So this was at our North Americans last summer. And on the lay day, we tipped over our boats, and everyone measured everything: centerboard position, spreader position, mast step position, all that. And everyone could walk up and down this row and check out everyone's boats. And first boat you see is Howard's, and the next is ours. And Mike Holt, who's a two-time world champion, his boat's in there in that lineup somewhere. And so now, everyone in the U.S. can check out what the setup is of the top boats. And that's just a good example of sharing information on how the boat's set up.
And with a 505 where everything is adjustable, and it lends itself to a certain type of sailor. I love sailing the boat because if you've got a good feel for the sport of sailing, like, you can really excel because you can figure out what you need to do to optimize performance, and it's available to you to adjust and change. What that means, though, is that this measurement and making sure that the way that you adjust and what you adjust and where you put your settings is really, really important to the performance of the boat. And so that's why, in particular in the 505 class, it's really noteworthy that you can do something like this, where you're able to get into the class and get up to speed really, really quickly. But I would say it also extends beyond just the boat setup and the measurement side of things. We also talk about how we sail the boats, very specifically the techniques that we use, whether it be the crew position or the skipper position. And we'll talk about this more in a second, but we do briefings and debriefings around the tactical situations and the conditions on the race course. So we'll get together before your race in a group like this one here. Before, obviously, we didn't have to social distance at the time this photo was taken. You look at photos like this now and it seems weird, but even Mike and I, we've just been able to get sailing again just in the last couple of weeks, and we're still doing this. I mean, sometimes we got our masks on and we're 6 feet apart, but we're still doing these types of briefings in our practices with other boats so that we can brief and debrief about all of the things on this list from top to bottom that'll help everybody achieve better results.
And yeah, it's not just about the boat itself. It's, also technique. It's also tactics. We do this at events. We do it during training. It's just, we're always sharing information, always learning from each other is the philosophy. So, the 505 class in the US has really adopted this. And we have briefings and debriefings, and just like we said, at events and during our training. Our pre-briefs before, we'll talk about, if it's an event, we'll talk about what the training is, what the weather's like for the day, what we think's important. If we're just training, we'll talk about what the goals are, what we want to test, and stuff like that.
And then even during the training, we do some things that are fairly uncommon. Mike and I went sailing yesterday at one of our practices, and we ended up sailing in, Mike and I, in a completely different boat than we ended up sailing out in. And I sailed with the other skipper and Mike with the other crew, and we were switching personnel as well as boats in order to really understand what the differences were and why we had those differences in performance between the boats. And that type of, again, commitment to sharing everything, including, in my case, your skipper, is what allows you to kind of go to the next level in what you're able to understand about the performance of your boat. And so, it really is a share everything, including the people type of mentality. And then afterwards, whether it's a practice or an event, this photo here in the lower right was taken actually after the end of the North American Championships. Everybody's tired and wants to go home, but we're, there we are still talking about what worked, what didn't work on the race course, and what we thought about different things, the techniques we used, all so that we can try to make each other better.
And yeah, just, talking about that sort of on the water training, and, we were swapping people around and jumping in the bay and swimming to the other boat. And it was very valuable, because what we concluded wasn't that there wasn't a technique difference or, a person difference. We determined that one of the boats was clearly quicker upwind and the other boat was clearly quicker downwind. And so now, afterwards we talked about that and we formed a plan for the next time we go out. We have a couple of pieces of gear that we're going to switch out, switch between the boats and see if if that speed difference goes with that piece of gear. And then we can sort of determine, what the fast, one of them's a spinnaker, one of them's a sailboard. We can determine what's fast and slow in each condition.
Yeah, and then we're going to have two boats going fast, upwind and down.
As I said, we adopted this philosophy, and pretty much now the whole American, team, I say, or the whole American section is on board, and it's really had some spectacular results. So we started the Team Tuesday concept actually in Southern California in '96. At that point, no American had won the Worlds in 14 years. So it was a bit of a dry spell for USA in 505 sailing. It took a couple of years to get going, but then you can see right here the success that we've had since then. We've had plenty of years of first and second. We've had two podium sweep years, once in '04 when the Worlds were in Santa Cruz, and once this last year when they were in Perth, Australia, a very windy event, and people from all over the world, and Americans were 1, 2, 3, and we were almost 1, 2, 3, 4. So it was really great. And I also really like this picture because this was actually in Annapolis, and this shows Americans sweeping this regatta. And this particular regatta, this was actually the pre-Worlds. We didn't win this regatta. Howie and Andy did. So you can see sort of by the heights, but really there's, even when you don't win, the fact that your training partners and tuning partners win or do well, and that, all the people that you train with are in your program do well, it's incredibly rewarding and gratifying that they're doing well as well as you are.
Yeah, and I'll just add a couple of things here. I think one of the great things to see on seeing your teammates do really well this past year in Perth, the third place team was a team that is relatively new to 505 sailing, Eric Anderson and Parker Shin, and they had just been busting their butts, putting work in with Mike and I and a lot of other teams. And they got a podium finish after a relatively short period of time in a very complex class, working in this system. And I think that's really proof positive of how well and how quickly this can work. And I'll also mention one other thing. I was not able to make it myself to the Olympics in the 49er, but in leading up to the Sydney Games in 2000, the US 49er team took a little page. We knew about the Team Tuesday happening down in Southern California, and we took a little page out of that leading up to the 2000 Games. And there was the team I was on, and then Jonathan and Charlie McKee, who were the people competing, you know, for the US and the 49er, and then Kevin Hall and Morgan Larson. We three teams really collaborated together very much in a Team Tuesday way for about a year and a half leading up to the Olympics. And the McKees came away with a bronze medal there. And that was definitely, I remember the references to the 505 Team Tuesday methodology that we were trying to sort of rip and repeat. In this case, to help, you know, the U.S. get a bronze medal.
Yeah, and so it's, you know, this sort of philosophy has gained, you know, for the U.S. fleet, it's been fantastic, and it's been fantastic for us as well personally. So yeah, this year for 2019, Adam and I were named Rolex Yachtsman of the Year, and by no small part due to the training philosophy we had. Our success would not have been there without this approach. And so yeah, it was quite an honor to receive this award. And also, it was also really nice that Daniela, a fellow St. Francis member, received the Yachtswoman of the Year.
For the second time, which is a great transition to our next slide.
So don't worry, we're not going to get too big-headed, because the other thing that Adam and I do is we race foil boards.
And we do not do it well, especially me.
And yeah, and so, yeah, for you, you know, I've been doing this for 4 years or something, and 4 or 5 years, and yeah, Daniela's been beating me the whole time, and you know, when you're getting beat by a 14-year-old girl, you know, that's a little bit of humility, but you know, the point is that we're still learning. It's, you know, we enjoy sailing them, and this whole spring, Adam and I, we haven't been able to do any 5-0 sailing until a week or two ago. And so we've been actually out there on our kiteboards, and given that you don't want to be anywhere near the guy next to you in the kiteboard, you know, we've been doing our training there too, and sort of having the same philosophy. And we, you know, we go upwind, we line up with each other, and we come in and we share information about, you know, what's working and maybe what the other person can do. And I think as a result, both of our performance in the kiteboards have dramatically increased this season. So look out, you know, maybe we'll do a little better. I don't think we'll be beating.
Yeah, I don't think anybody should be really worried. I do know that Daniela's in front of me. I know that, but I can't actually tell it because she's so far in front of me, I can't see her. So, but I know she's up there somewhere.
That concludes our presentation. We don't have much more. It's back to you now, Ron.
Thank you for such a cool presentation. Couple questions. So, number of boats in a typical world. Give me the number of 5-0s in the worlds.
Yeah, so it varies based on location. So this past year, I think there was about 90. That's a low number because it's in Fremantle, Australia, which is a pretty hard place to get to, and the furthest point on the planet from sort of Europe and the US, so a long way to get there. When we won in '99 in France, I think there were 158 boats. And I think the record is there were 195 or something in a few years ago in France, La Rochelle, and yeah, I think there was 170 or something in Germany. So,
and that's all on one line, Ron.
Really?
No matter how large the fleet is, they sail on one. It's actually a gate start, but everybody starts together.
In Perth, where was the venue?
Yeah, we're sailing in Fremantle. So yeah, we launch off the beach, and our race course, it wasn't the same race course as the 83 Cup. They were sort of out in the channel between Rottnest Island and the land, and we were a bit closer to the land. Kind of, if you leave Frio and turn left, we were there, and it's actually a great spot. It's beautiful water, crystal clear. It's like the wind is like San Francisco, except it's about
Hotter.
25 degrees warmer. Yeah,
Yeah.
water and
Well, and the water's like clear. You can see the bottom. I mean, it's beautiful.
Yeah. When we first sailed 61 there and people could see the geek, we knew they'd be able to see our bow rudder and all that stuff. So we did a simulcast broadcast with 7 in Australia and NBC in America to show the underbottom, where we had John Bertrand commenting on looking at it, because we knew they'd see us immediately as soon as the boat was in the water. They'd know what was going on. So what was the sea state like when you last sailed in Fremantle? And I want to talk a little bit about, so what was the sea state like?
yeah, we were pretty far inside, so it was sort of short chop, similar to what we did in San Francisco. Though.
Yeah, that picture behind Mike is from Frio, so you can kind of see the sea state right there.
Okay. Okay. So talk about sailing the boat in that sea state versus, just talk about what you're doing different when you're in choppier conditions versus smoother conditions, lake conditions, and so on. Talk a little bit about what you guys do differently.
Yeah, so the good thing about sailing in San Francisco is we do get a big variety of conditions, and we get a lot of short, steep chop when we're sailing in the ebb, and we get a lot of super smooth. Actually, we were out last night, and it was our final run in was blowing about 20, and the waves were about an inch high and a 4-knot flood, and so that was a treat. But yeah, also we sail in Santa Cruz a lot in big rollers, and yeah, I'll just what I do and what Adam does is a little different. So I'll talk about what I do.
Yeah.
Sort of when you're in the roller state, yeah, there's a lot more steering and a lot more main sheet, and you're sort of working the boat sort of like you do a laser fin, working the boat up and over waves and steering through in that cycle. When you're in short chop, you sort of have to sail in a footier mode just to pound through the chop. And then, yeah, when it's flatter, you can sail a little higher.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, depending on the wave state, there's a couple of really critical factors. So I'm trapezing, so I'm not doing the shoulder things that Mike's doing, but do quite a bit of just moving up and down the rail, forward and back, depending on are we in a flat spot or the fore and aft weight is pretty important. Jib trim is super critical on a 505, and depending on the wave state, it changes quite a bit in terms of how round, how flat. We got, as we mentioned before, there's infinite adjustments. So getting that jib shape really right is super critical to allowing Mike to be able to sail the boat the way that he wants to be able to sail it. And then downwind is there's quite a bit of difference too. You can actually work a 505 pretty hard from the wire in downwind wave states, and there are times when you can make big gains by being really physical with the boat and knowing sort of when to be physical with the boat.
Talk a little about that. Let's talk about wave state. You're going down the breeze a bit, and you're talking about your position on the boat fore and aft as you come over a wave and down the wave and so on. When are you running forward?
Sure. I mean, it can vary a huge amount based on, how quickly you're overtaking the waves. We are trapezing downwind in a 505. So you're kind of wave skipping, if you want to say it that way. But when you're traveling faster than the waves, the boat can squat in a trough, right? And slow way down. And you're trying to avoid that both by steering up and over the waves. But really it's about getting that fore and aft push when you're kind of at a wave crest to get you down a wave, or to be able, yeah, exactly. So, well, I mean, in Santa Cruz where you have a larger wave state, I mean, I'll go between, right next to Mike and he's on the back corner to the shroud. And it's not always that much movement, but I'll move quite a bit. sometimes in
So
order
Adam,
to try to help steer the boat over the wave a little more quickly than would be if you didn't do that.
and your height, you're like 6'5". How tall are you?
Yeah, 6'6", just under
6'6".
6'6".
And Mike, how tall are you?
Yeah, I'm 6'2". And yeah, we're a pretty tall team. And the funny part is, when Adam and I first met, I was crewing on a 5.0 and Adam was driving a 5.0. So we sailed against each other, but not in the positions we're doing now.
And I have been called Little Adam as a 5.0 crew, not because of my lack of height, but I'm one of the lighter, believe it or not, 5.0 guys out there.
So talk to us. I want to ask about that. Talk about weight, what you are now, and what you think is ideal. So Adam, you're 6'6", and how much do you weigh?
I weigh 205, 204, 205.
205. And Mike, you're 6'2", and how much do you weigh?
Yeah, I probably weigh 185 right now, which is heavy. And that's what I was in Frio. If I think it's going to be a windy world, I'll be 185. If I think it's going to be a light world, I'll get down below 175. You can't really, if I get much lighter than that, I start getting sick a lot, and it's just not.
Yeah,
healthy.
I got down to
That's sort of
195 for Annapolis.
Yeah, and I was like 172 or something.
Yeah, you were looking waif-like.
Yeah. So 385 is about right. It's a little on the big side for the world, but I think it's a really good all-around weight. And we have something called, in the 505 we call the 400 club. And if you're over 400, you're sort of throwing all of your throwing everything in one corner, and you're quick in the breeze, but you might suffer downwind, and you'll definitely suffer in light air.
Talk about a day in the life of a practice day. Let's talk about that, and then we're going to talk about a day in the life of a race day. So give me a how many guys are you going to be practicing with? How many teams do you like?
We'd love to have as many people as we can come out on Tuesdays. Over the past few years, we've had anywhere from 2 to 5 or something. And I actually think that probably that 3 to 4 boats is probably the sweet spot. As long as you have, 3 or 4 boats that are all really tough and competitive, you can stay organized. You can, everyone stays together. You get a bunch of boats and they kind of get spread out some, but, our typical day is we show up at 4 o'clock or something, rig the boats. The goal is to push off the dock at 5:05 p.m. We'll have a little chat beforehand on what we're going to do, and that'll be different based on the conditions. If it's a steady day or we want to test some equipment, we'll talk about how we're going to line up and where we're going to line up. And as you know, the bay has different spots, on different weather systems where it's good. If we think it's going to be super shifty, we might concentrate just on racing that day because it's pointless to try to speed tune. So yeah, we kind of come up with the plan of the day, and then we launch and go out and sail, and we'll do one race or one drill, and then we'll chat about it.
And how do you do starts?
Sometimes, it depends on how many boats we have. Obviously, if there's 2, a rabbit start, or sometimes we'll do rabbit starts, or sometimes we'll just line up. And sometimes lining up is better because if you have one boat that has been sort of proved to be faster in that condition, they can sort of line up a little bit back in a tough position. And if one boat's a little slower, they can start a little advanced, and it makes the lineup last a little longer. Sometimes we just have a race where we do a little rabbit start and we go around Black Hauler and down to Fort Mason or something and back. Just depends on the day.
So give me an example of a drill. What kind of things would you do?
Boat handling, we'll try a few different things, or maybe we'll make a rule for the day that on the run, you have to do 5 jibes on the run.
Talk to me a little bit about jibing 5.0. You got guys on, wires. Just give me the step, what you're doing as a helmsman, then we're going to have them do the same thing.
Yeah, I'll start. It's definitely simpler on my end, and then I'll let Adam talk, and that's going to be a little bit longer talk because he's pretty busy up there. So I wind up doing the tactics downwind. So I'm always looking around, looking for pressure. I'm talking with Adam about, what's going on and what we think is good. At some point during the run, and it's not necessarily right before the jibe, I'll go and I'll just cleat the weather jib sheet. It's slack, it's not pulling the jib around. And we have a pole launcher, so I hand the pole launcher line to Adam. He actually throws it overboard. It just skips behind the boat, barely touching the. If it's really windy, I'll pull the main in a little bit, and I'll just put the boat into a nice even arc. And I'll grab the boom, pop it over, and then as soon as I can, I actually grab the new sheet. And when Adam's done, he'll grab it for me. Now Adam will talk. He's got a lot more going on.
So yeah, Michael, count down into the jibe. And so at about 2 or 1 on the countdown, I'll swing in off the wire. So I got one hand on the wire, one hand on the spin sheet. As you come in, it's important to kind of trim the kite right. And what that looks like is kind of easing it slowly out, not too fast, and not keeping it strapped in, so that the kite rotates around the front of the boat.
Example, Adam, are you going from starboard jibe into a port jibe? What's the example right now?
Yeah. Let's say we're going from starboard into port. So if you were in the bar having a dark and stormy and you saw us, we'd be on starboard going to port. Okay. So I come in, ease the kite out a little bit so it gets out in front of the boat. You then have to blow the pole. So I'll reach forward with the pole, blow the pole, and the pole comes swinging back. If we're doing it right, by this time, Mike is already well into the jibe. So I'm going to grab the boom vang at the same time that he's grabbing the main sheet, and we're both trying to yank the boom over, especially when it's really windy. That's just the most important thing. Get the boom over. And then as soon as that, I feel the pressure coming off of the boom, it's then uncleat the old lure jib sheet so that your jib goes across, grab the new pole launcher, pull the pole out, the new pole. We have 2 poles on a 505, so one goes in, one goes out. And then usually by then, Mike's got the sheet. I reach down, I grab the spin sheet from him, and then hook up, go out on the wire. Oh, and then you got to pull. Then you got to pull in the old, the new jib sheet.
When
once
you
you're out on
time
the wire.
in drills, when you time your jibes, how fast are you jibing?
It's not a super fast. I mean, we could, if you just wanted to jibe fast, you could jibe fast. But the point is to keep the kite full and maintain VMG through the whole maneuver. So yeah, like, you know, just to walk through it, I'll be like, okay, we're going to jibe in 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's go. And I'll turn, I'm ducking, I'll throw the boom over, I'll go down, I reach down, I grab the new sheet. As I'm heading up, I'm trimming in the new sheet. And sort of as I get standing up, Adam will grab the sheet and go out on the rail wire. It's about that long.
Yeah, and if you do it right, you can almost plane through the jibe, you know, and so that's why it's really helpful to, you know, if you slam it over really fast, you're going to shake the air out of the kite, you know, so you want to, that kite, it's a symmetrical kite, like it's got to rotate around just like, you know, old school style.
Mm-hmm. And so for people who haven't sailed 5.0s, talk about boat speed. Let's say it's 18 knots of breeze. True. What's the boat speed? What's the boat going through? You know, your boat's constantly varying the speed, obviously, but give people an idea about how fast the boat's going through the water.
Yeah, so yeah, it's interesting. There's a big transition. So we sort of go from sort of the high displacement mode, and probably in about 14, 15 knots, and depending on wave state and everything else, we'll switch into a planing mode.
Mm-hmm.
And so when
He's
we
talking about upwind.
Yeah, upwind. Trick there is, yeah, you just got to get getting height back, and you can sort of, you know, I'm playing the leech of the main and sort of loading it up and bringing the boat back up. And as I feel the boat start to slow down, I'll just bear off a little bit and just sort of, you know, you got it. And that's really what it's all about, is that feel of keeping the boat going fast and going high and just finding that fine line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and upwind and planing mode, we go just over 8 knots.
Mm-hmm. And off the breeze, just before a jibe, how fast are you going? 18 knots of breeze?
Depends on, I mean, we'll basically go wind speed downwind.
Mm-hmm. So in 18 knots of breeze, you're going.
So, yeah.
And when you go through the jibe, if it's a good jibe, how slow are you going to go through the jibe?
We've had some in Santa Cruz, you know, where you jibe on a big wave and you pop out of the wave on the new side, and the boat's just absolutely ripping, where, you know, you probably didn't lose more than a couple knots. But I'd say typically, you know, if you have a good jibe and you were doing 18 knots, you'll slow down to 15 or something, and then as you jump back on the wire, you'll speed back up. And then if you have a bad jibe, you'll be going 6 or 7 knots out of it, right?
Or 0 and be upside down if it's really a yard sale. Yeah.
Yeah, that does happen.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So back in the Ultimate 30 days, we actually had a drill on Hexcel about what to do when we flip, because everybody flipped in those days. 8-man, no trapeze, ultralight boat. We were always flipping the boats, and so we actually had a preset drill about what to do, down the breeze, up the breeze, whatever. Talk a little bit about you. Obviously, upside down is the slowest of all possible modes. What do you do though? If you're in the world, then you do. What are the cases when you're most likely to flip in that case?
So I have a funny story. I have a funny story about that. It actually wasn't with Adam, but with the guy I sailed with in San Francisco in '09, and we were leading the race. And actually, one of the common ways that 5.0s tip over is the rudder cavitates when you're pushing it really hard. And so it was on a reach leg, and we had a nice lead. And it's funny, the guys in second, they told me after the race, they said, we're one mistake away from leading this race. And about that time, you know, Jeff and I stall the rudder out, and the boat rounds up. And, you know, we had done a ton of practicing that year in San Francisco, and a ton of practicing, and talked about what we do in a capsize, and especially in that situation. And so, yeah, what he says, yeah, he unhooks from the wire and goes directly to the centerboard, and I go for the kite. A lot of people try to right the boat with the kite up, and that's futile. It's just not going to work. And this one was, we were getting filmed by a camera boat at the time, and so the boat rounds up, and you know, Jeff actually went for the centerboard, and I go for the kite. And you watch the boat rounding up, and before the mast hits the water, the kite's halfway in the tube. I just reach down and start yanking it, right? And it's bam, yank it, and you don't actually have to get it all the way. You can leave the pole out, but it's 90% of the way in. And then I just sort of jump in the water and float, so I'm not fighting Jeff. He pulls the boat up and jumped onto the rail, and I scooped up, and we jumped in the boat and took off. We have massive transom flaps in the back, and all the water shoots out the back, and we were still in the lead. And the guys in second said, like, okay, maybe 2 mistakes from me.
So you came over the transom, that's your mode to get back in the boat?
Yeah, you just in that case, just as the boat starts riding, you actually just grab the hiking strap, and as it's just sort of scoops you up. And then bam, right into it, and off you go. And you know, that's sort of a capsize you see come in, and you can do something about it. I mean, we have the same philosophy, but yeah, if you capsize mid-jibe, it gets a bit messier and doesn't necessarily go that well. But yeah, we've also found that the best technique is not to capsize.
Yeah, keep the pointy thing up into the sky. Yeah. If you capsize to windward, it's sort of a yard sale. It takes a long time.
So let's talk about sails for a bit. So whose sails are you using these days?
Yeah, good sponsor plug here. We're fortunate enough to be sponsored by Glazer Sails, and PZ&J have supported us all along the way. And we actually did quite a bit of development on things like spinnaker, well, actually all 3 sails, when Mike and I started sailing together in sort of 13, 14, I think it was. And, you know, without going into too much detail, what we were doing is we looked at luff curve on the main to really try to optimize the shape up and down the range. And we actually did a little bit of work. We evolved this standard from a cross cut to more of a radial shape in the main sails. Then on the jibs are kind of, as I mentioned before, really critical on a 5.0. And so we worked a lot in particular on like the exits of the jibs. And we did some flatter stuff and some fuller stuff up and down the sail. And we now have a couple of different things that we've added to sort of the state of the art that seem to be really, really good. And then spinnakers have been quite a bit of an evolution as well. And Mike, you're going to have to remind me exactly what we did from the sort of old AP days to where we are today. But it's a little bit of a fuller and rounder setup than what we had before. And you know, it's definitely fast. So the sales are a big part of the program. And what's great is having helped sort of develop them. Mike and I know the sales really well, so it's very easy for us to kind of look up and know whether something's not right and to fix it. So that's an advantage.
Well, I was just to say at Spinnakers, you know, we did some development for the Worlds in San Francisco in '09, and we came up with a small flat spinnaker, and sort of the key there is that you could sail the boat at a hotter angle and faster. And because of the chop in the Berkeley Circle, if you tried to sail low, you just plow into the wave, you know, the steep chop. And so that sailing that hotter, you could sort of skip over the waves better. Some of the other European sail makers had this bigger, fuller kite, and in conditions that you see sort of more typical in the world, they were able to work low on us and sort of get a tactical position on us. So the kite we're using now is somewhere in between, and what we found is that, yeah, we can go it's flatter than the European boats, but we sail it hotter, and then your apparent wind goes forward, and it winds up being about the same height and just a little better fast forward. And yeah, so it's sort of a hybrid in between, and that's the kite we're using now.
So what do you guys wear? What are you wearing on the boat?
Yeah, I wear a wetsuit and a spray top and boots, and I wear hiking pads that, you know, something from the Finn days, and that does two things. You know, instead of the rail digging into your leg, you know, it's more comfortable, but it also holds your butt out of the water, and so you can hike way out and lifts your whole body up so that the waves don't smack you as much. So yeah, I wear hiking pads, and a couple other skippers do. A lot of them don't, but yeah, I think it's key.
Yeah, Mike hikes really hard. I wear a wetsuit. You know, when we're in the bay, it's always a, you know, full suit, like a 3 or 4 millimeter. I'm obviously wearing a harness as well. I usually wear a Lycra top on top because there's a lot of ropes on a 505, and getting them caught on your life jacket is a recipe for disaster. And then you got to have a good pair of gloves because you're pulling on things constantly.
And the other thing that's critical for the skipper is a good pair of sunglasses that have a lot of coverage on your face. And it's not for the sun, but the water comes shooting off of the bow. It might bounce off of Adam's ankles and then goes directly into your eyes. And so, yeah, you pretty much have to learn to sail with getting sprayed in the face the whole time. And
yeah, it's basically like you take a hose and put your thumb over the end of the hose and it's straight into your face all day. That's what it's like.
And so yeah, if you don't have glasses on, it's hopeless. So yeah, you got to have a good pair of glasses.
Talk about tuning your rig before you go out. Give us a condition and what you might do.
We just rigged a new mast this winter, and so we went through the whole thing, and sort of what you would adjust on shore is the spreader rake. That's not we don't have it set up to adjust on the water. Some people have had that, we don't. And yeah, we're looking at this new mast, and we think it's a little softer than our past mast, so we're adjusting the spreaders a little bit more forward to try to straighten it out more. You know, you got to make sure it's straight in the boat. So yeah, you'll side up the mast, check it fore and aft, left and right, make sure that it's not bowing one way or another. Check the spreaders to make sure they're equally swept. So that's sort of initial setup. Yeah, and yeah, check your rake, make sure your rake's calibrated. You know, we go through quite a bit. So in light air, we'll be at 25 feet, 10 inches. And then in heavy air, we'll be at 24 feet, 6 inches. So you know, a foot and a half of rake difference.
Yeah, which is a lot on a 16-foot boat. You know, we also, they're now moving to stuff, everything else you can adjust on the water. I mean, obviously rake you can adjust on the water, but we can adjust our shroud chain plates. So they're on tracks, and generally you move them further back as it gets windier.
Just stay under the spreaders as you get more rake is what you're saying. So as you induce rake, you just move the spreader, you move the chain plates aft, is what you're saying.
That's correct.
And what about, let me ask about down the breeze before we leave the mast position. So down the breeze, how much does the mast go forward? What's the backstay throw and all that like?
Yeah, so yeah, we don't have a backstay. We have shrouds and a forestay, and we just pull on the forestay, and we go to 25-10. And so yeah, it seems like it's vertical, you know, in the boat at that point. I've never really checked it, but yeah, the boom will be that high off of the tank. If we raked all the way back, the boom would be hitting the tank. So we actually have 2 flattening reefs in the back of the main that as we rake, we'll gradually throw in different flattening reefs to keep the boom from hitting the deck, and also so I can get under it.
Yeah, and in the light stuff, it's important also when it's really light, you actually pre-bend the mast. So you'll actually put a bunch of rig tension on, and then you'll ease off. There's a ram on the front of the mast that pushes the front lower portion of the mast back, right? And supports the lower column of the mast. You'll actually ease that off and pull rig tension on in order to pre-bend the mast so that your sails aren't too full in the really light stuff. And then you, as the wind builds, you'll ease that back off, have a fuller setup, and as it builds further, then you start to rake.
So the question I asked earlier, let's do that next. So bow to stern adjustments. First of all, you got jib cloth. What's going bow to stern? Let's go back.
Yeah, so you've got a jib. We have just a jib halyard. Some people also have a jib Cunningham. They do the same thing. We just use the jib halyard. On the jib itself, you can sort of think of jib leads as you can kind of put them anywhere you want 3-dimensionally on a 505. Some people have more complicated setups or simple setups. We actually use a relatively simple setup, but you can kind of put the jib.
So you got a floating lead that goes up and down, in and out. Is that what's going on?
Well, what we have is just the jib lead itself, which is fore and aft on a track, and then we have a barber hull that will pull it out, but it also does a little bit of sort of up and down action. The rake obviously dramatically changes the jib leads as well. We don't have anything more complicated. Some people have really complicated systems where you can, go very precisely in 3 dimensions, but we don't. I think that's it on the jib. We talked a lot about rig. Obviously, I have all the normal controls. Centerboard is a really key control on a 505, and making sure you're bringing the board up a little bit as the wind builds, and that's really important for getting the boat to track the way you want it to track.
We'll talk about that. When is it up? When is it down? How much is it moved?
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Mike.
yeah, in light air, it's all the way down, and it's actually forward to vertical. It'll sweep forward in light air. And then sort of in the medium breeze, we'll pull it to vertical. And then as it gets windier, we'll sweep it back. So 0 is all the way forward for us. The head is sticking past the case. That's vertical. 5 or 6 degrees forward in light air, and vertical in medium air, and swept 5 or 6 degrees aft in heavy air. And also the pivot point is way forward of the leading edge. And so what that means is that as you lower it, the whole board's dropping sort of like a dagger board, so you gain a bunch of board area. And then as you sweep it up, not only do you add sweep, but you also are pulling the board up, vertically up, and so you lose area very quickly.
Okay, next, so we got, how often are you changing the jib lead? How much are you moving it?
Oh, usually, if the conditions are stable, we'll set it, and then it'll just be that way for the whole day. generally, we're usually not changing jib leads within a day. We do change the barber hauler quite a lot when it's windy. You only use barber hauler when it's above about 12 knots, but that seems to be all the time for us. So,
So you'll open. So
yeah, I mean, what it does is it actually, it gives you more leech tension as you ease the jib in more wind, because on a 505, you're actually easing the jib the more wind you get. But then the jib gets really full in that mode. So you use the barber hauler. It does take the lead out, but it also, it brings a little bit of leech tension back into the jib. Which is the real key, we've found in a 505 for going quickly upwind, is to make sure that the profiles of the leech in the main are well matched, and you've got sort of similar twist profiles in both sails up, vertically, and so that's what we're really focusing on there, and that'll depend on how much vang Mike's got. How dead on we are with the rake, right? If you're really overpowered and you don't have the opportunity to rake back yet, the main's going to be further out, and so you got to adjust for that. So it's very dynamic.
When you said you don't have the opportunity to rake back, what's the process of raking back? How do you rake back? Just move the chain plates aft. What do you do to make it rake more?
No, so yeah, that's you ease the forestay off and then you pull on the shrouds, and those controls are actually right by my front hand, but I'm playing the main and I'm steering, and so if we get a couple knot increase and we think the boat's still okay and we can adjust other things and still be fast, we'll do that. But if it looks like it's going to continue to build more than we can adjust for, I have to cleat the main at that point, and I reach down and I dump off a bunch of forestay, and then I grab the shrouds and yank the tension back on the shrouds, and then start sailing. And it sounds very simple, but yeah, when you're trying to steer through waves and puffs and do that, there's definitely
you give up a little in order to make a rake adjustment. And by the way, it's much easier to rake back than it is to make rake forward. So depending on what you're doing there, it's sort of a calculus, right? Of like, what do you got to give up to make sure, is it better to just suffer through it for a short time, or do we really need to make the adjustment here?
Can you talk about that with each other? You say a little more rake, what do you think? Is that a collaboration?
Yeah, and usually when we're talking about it, we'll look up the course and like, well, what do you think? Is this going to hold? Is this going to build, or is this temporary? And if that says like, yeah, it's we're going to get this and we're going to get more for the rest of the beat, then then it's like, okay, well, I'm going to rake. And then we also have to communicate that, because as I rake, he's going to trim the jib differently at the new rake. So yeah, we talk about it. But if on the other hand, if he says, no, this is temporary, it's going to be light again in 30 seconds, then we'll just sort of adjust the sheet trim and sort of the steering to get through that puff, and then be back in the sweet zone.
So now the Team Tuesday approach of constantly collaborating with your other teammates. What other countries are using approaches that you admire or like? Who else do you like in the game?
To be honest, I like our approach the best.
Yeah, I know, I got that, but who else is a reasonable number two?
Germany has done very well in the past few years. And before that, sort of England. And they almost do it through a different boats out as possible. So sort of the biggest fleets you're going to have are in the Baltic, because the Germans have done a really good job of building a huge, huge fleet. They don't share information the way we do, especially amongst the top guys. They'll probably share it with the people they're trying to get into the class, but certainly the top guys don't share with each other.
What about boat manufacturers?
So we have a water rat, which is built by Larry Tuttle in Santa Cruz, California, and they're like a Stradivarius. If you can get one, it's definitely the boat to have, but it's almost impossible to get one. So the boat that's behind me was the next to last one that was made. and Howard Hamlin has the last one that was made. And the only way we convinced Larry to build it for us is that we had to go help him build it. So literally, you know, I was down there in the shop cutting out core, and if, you know, I'm an engineer, a product development engineer, and I'm just thinking the whole time that I'm making this, it's like, this process is insane. This is so over the top and inefficient, and I'd be throwing a total fit if it wasn't my boat, right? But it's like, you have to go through and, you know, you put the core in the boat before you're laying it up, and you have to mesh it all together so it meshes in perfectly, and you have to like sand it and taper it, you know, at the front of the boat so the core meshes in and all that core gets glued together. That is not how most boats are made. Most boats, you just lay the first thing down and you lay the core down, and then you know, you get anywhere near the rails or the keelson, and it just stops a couple inches from it, and you just lay the thing over and you don't worry about it. But Larry is a perfectionist, and a water rat is much longer than other boats. So when we won in '09 in San Francisco, that boat was 10 years old.
Wow.
And we sailed it yesterday, and
Yeah.
and we were beating the boat behind us, at least downwind.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And you know, that's true for water rat. And so I think when we won in '99, the boat was 12 years old or something. So I'd say a water rat has, yeah, 15 years, and if you take good care of it, maybe more than that.
So now compare a good boat to a bad boat.
Well, you know, the European boats are actually quite good too. So there's, it's skipping my head right now, Adam. What's the builder?
Ovington?
Yeah, Ovington. Ovington builds boats now, and they're much more affordable. They're less expensive, and you can get them, which is important. And they're good, solid boats. But they're probably good. I mean, Mike Holt's boat is still competitive. It's 5 years old or something, but that's 5 or 6 years is probably what you're going to get out of one of those compared to a water rat.
What do they start losing? Do they just not, they don't stay as stiff? Talk to me about the characteristics. Yeah. How's the boat get slower and slower over time compared to a water?
Yeah, I think yeah, they start getting soft. They might take on some weight depending on the core that you use. If our boats are, you start getting dings and you have foam core, that doesn't have that problem. Everything's away from. If you get a hole in it, you just cut that core area out and repair it. It's fine. The boat we were sailing, you know, yesterday is Kevlar. With, you know, it's carbon and Kevlar, and this boat's all carbon. So this boat's a little lighter in the end. So I mean, in that case, really that boat didn't get slower, but the new one's got a little faster.
And what's a boat cost? How long does it take Tuttle to make one?
The longest part with Tuttle to make one is getting him to make it.
It's the convincing.
That
could take 6 years, actually.
takes years. Yeah. But once you get him to make it, you can have it in a couple months. If you want a Ovington or a Rondar, you call them up, and they'll put you in line. And if you live in Europe, within a month, you can probably have a rigged boat. Over here, you got to get it. You know, if you're going to a Worlds or something, you can have it at the Worlds for you. If you want it over here, you got to get it shipped over here, and it's better to wait till a couple people buy it and you ship it together. But I'd say for one of those boats, you could win a World for less than 30 grand, for probably like mid 20s, especially now with the exchange rate, probably for 25 to 30 grand. You could have a boat that could win a Worlds. I mean, and that's the whole deal: trailers, dollies, covers, the whole kit and caboodle.
Mm-hmm.
And a water rat's certainly going to be more than that. It's going to be that much for the bare hull, and then you got to rig it. You know.
So what's the comparable cost for a water rat? 25, 28 for one of those? How much for a water rat?
Yeah, probably 35 for a water rat.
You said testing equipment. You're going to test some gear. Give me a typical something you might be testing.
Jibs. We've been doing a lot of jib testing lately, and we talked to Jay about you know what this one's doing and how it looks and what our performance is, and We actually were experimenting using Dacron just because we could iterate more effectively, more cost effectively. And we had at the Worlds this year, we had a jib that sort of was the latest version, and we hadn't tested it as much as we'd liked, but the testing that we had done was very positive, and we wound up measuring that and using it most days at the Worlds. This jib we're testing now, we went out with it, we kind of see how we do against our tuning partners versus how we normally do, and like next time we go sailing, we decided that we're going to put the jib on our tuning partner's boat, and we're going to use the standard and see how they go relative to us.
What's the useful life of a jib and a spinnaker?
Yeah, the main is definitely the longest because it gets the least thrashing. Spinnakers, well, and so in terms of time, I mean, we can get a full season out of a main, no problem. A jib, you're going to get, if you're sailing hard and doing all the events, you probably need 2 jibs in a year. And you can probably make a spinnaker last a whole year as well.
And, that said, like when the Worlds were here in 09, you can measure in a couple jibs, and you blew up one of them in the pre-Worlds and one of them in the World.
What's the main cost? What's the jib cost? What's the spinnaker cost?
People ask me this all the time. I try to forget.
Yeah, like a jib's like $900, right? That's the number that's in my head. Is that right?
And it's spinning?
Spinnaker's got to be close to $2,000 or something like that.
I think a lot of spinnakers like $1,200. I think a jib's a little less than 900, and I think a main's like 1,500 or something. But I don't know. Go to glazersales.com.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's put it this way: it's really cheap relative to big boat sailing.
So Adam, lastly, tell me, what is it you like? Talk to me about Mike as a driver, as your skipper.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so much to say. I mean, first of all, Mike just has an incredible talent and technique in the boat to be able to make the boat go fast. Nobody hikes harder than Mike does. And then I would say that what I really appreciate about the way we sail together is we've developed a system where we complement each other really well in terms of what we're focused on and what our strengths are as individual sailors. And that's, any team that's going to do well, that's what you're striving for. So, for example, when we're sailing upwind, I'm generally making the tactical decisions. Mike is really focused on boat speed. And I'm doing a little bit with jib, but we're talking to each other about how the boat feels and what mode we're in. And then as a sort of tactician upwind, I'll make the calls on what we're doing, but Mike's feeding the information that he's getting, right? And then downwind, it actually reverses completely. So I'm really focused on trying to make the boat, go in and out of the waves and go as fast as it can, trim the spinnaker, that sort of thing. Mike's making the tactical decisions, but I'll give him observations about, what we're seeing and that sort of thing. And I think at the end of the day, I think one of the things that we do well is that the way that we collaborate in the boat is really always constructive. We all make mistakes as sailors, and Mike and I individually make mistakes all the time. But we don't ever dwell on those mistakes. In fact, in the 2016 Worlds, which we won, we had an awful first day, largely because of poor tactical decisions that I had made. And I think we were in something like 30th place after the first day. But it was heads down, tomorrow's a new day, and keep cool about it and just do your job. And, we were able to come back and actually win that event. So I think that, we talked a lot about teamwork in the U.S. team sense here, but 505 is a boat where there's 2 people sailing together, and you got to have 2 individual teammates that are really skilled, but also the teamwork amongst those teammates is absolutely critical to getting the most out of the boat. So those are the reasons I like sailing with Mike.
Mike, talk to us about Adam as crew.
So there's a couple of things about Adam. So I joked about it earlier that when I met Adam that I was crewing and he was driving. but I think that's really important because when we're sailing together, you know, I know what he's experienced and what he can see and feel, and he knows what I can see and the information that he needs, right? So we know each other's roles well enough that, you know, we can add value without often stating the obvious. As he said, we collaborate, but if there's plenty of situations, very frequently in a world, you're in a very tight, sticky situation, and the driving requires 100% of your focus, and you look around for 1 second and you're gonna not be at that optimum VMG, or you're gonna hit a wave, or something's gonna go wrong. And there's been a lot of races at the Worlds where, you know, we're get off the line, we're in a tight spot, and I'm just concentrating on driving, and Adam says, okay, and you know, in 5 seconds, we're gonna get this little shift, and we're gonna tack, and we're gonna duck those 2 boats. And I'm like, okay, I don't think about it. He's calling tactics, I have complete faith in him, and then bam, we tack. And I think, especially in Fremantle, you know, that was the case. Going into it, everyone thought you got to go left. It's all about a left, you know, racetrack. And I think Adam figured out pretty quickly that wasn't the case. Every beat, not just first beat, every beat, playing shifts, looking for pressure, and just working our way up. And you know, the fact that I can have total faith in his tactics just takes a huge load off of me, and I can concentrate on what, you know, I need to do.
Well, Mike Martin and Adam Lowry, thank you very much for being our guests at the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. It's great to hear you guys talk about your process together, and it's clear and obvious why you would be the 2019 Rolex Yachtsman of the Year. You personify really, really collaborative teamwork. And with an incredible stellar track record, some people, you know, don't have such a I'm learning constantly attitude as it seems that you guys have. And it's been very, very informative. Thanks so much for sharing with our viewers, just like you share with your other teammates. It's terrific. You have a great fan club at the St. Francis Yacht Club. We're proud as punch to have you guys as our members. And yes, of course, to have swept 2 times in 3 years, all the Rolex, both men and women, Yachts People of the Year. And it's been a great pleasure having you guys be our guests on the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. Thank you so much. And best of luck as you continue racing at the top of the game.
All right, thanks for inviting us, Ron. It's a pleasure. Always wanted to do this, so thanks for the invite.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. Really appreciate it. Can't wait to see everybody back at the club again sometime soon.
Good on you. And with that, the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon is adjourned. Thanks, guys.